Hello and welcome to episode 57 of the Page One podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us at the Page One podcast. If this is your first episode at the podcast, we like to talk to writers of all kinds, authors, screenwriters, comics writers, about how they got into the industry, what their process is, and try and get as many hints and tips as possible. And this week we have, I suppose, a new kind of writer on the podcast, or the first of this kind of writer on the podcast.
We have Helen Lederer on this week, who, as Marco says, she is an author. She's written books, but she's perhaps best known for her stand-up work. She became quite famous. She came up in the 80s with French and Saunders, Rik Mayall, Enfield, that kind of crowd. She's written plays. She perhaps best known on TV for Absolutely Fabulous. She was the role of Catriona, for those that were fans of that show. And she's really done quite an impressive, like her work is, it goes from comedian monologues, it goes TV work, she's written plays, she's done
radio work.
It's really impressive scope she's done.
And in between all of that, she's also founded her own literary award as well.
Just on the side.
The Comedy Women in Print Award. So, we chat to her about all of that, and it's a really interesting chat and fun chat, as you would imagine. But we talk about, how you go about writing comedy and try to test things out in front of an audience and things like that.
Yeah. It's an interesting. It's a different type of writing, isn't it? I suppose you're writing that kind of that live audience feel to it. And it isn't like you have a draft and you pass it to your wife or whatever. It's you have a draft and you read it out loud and you maybe don't get any laughs and you redraft it again. It's quite
that's right. But also it depends, as she says in the podcast, on who the audience is and what you take from that, depending on who the audience is and all of these things. So there's a lot of considerations to take into account as well. So as I say, really fun chat, really interesting. We'll get straight into it after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, the Page One notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
On with the show.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with Page One.
We've had authors, screenwriters, journalists, video game writers, comic writers, but you're the first stand-up comic that we've had, and that's something that we have been wondering about as well. Obviously you've done lots of different types of writing and we'll get to that, but was being a stand-up comic what you wanted to do initially?
Well, that's quite odd, isn't it? Because remember, I'm very, very old. So when I started doing it, was literally, I saw something on television the other day. Oh, yeah, saw something on Princess Di, and I was thinking, oh, my goodness. So I think when she got married, it was a kind of retrospective thing. And that was 81. And I was thinking, I remember writing a sketch about that. So we're talking about 80s, and that's a long time ago. But I know that when I was 10, I wanted to perform and write. Mm-hmm. And it's just in the 80s, there just still wasn't like a norm for the notion of stand-up comedy in the way there is now, let alone for women, even though uniquely, in many ways, Victoria Wood was there doing the work, because there was a program called New Faces, a talent program. So there was a sort of a funnel, but the opportunities aren't like that. It wasn't normal. But I always wanted to write and perform, and I think being a stand-up comedian is a writer-performer, really.
Yeah. And what's the writing process when you do you sit down and do you have an idea of what you want to say, or do things just kind of pop in your head and you think, how can I make that the funniest way it can be?
I think it's both. For instance, I started in a double act. I had a wonderful double act partner called Maggie Fox, and I stole her from an audition. She was already with someone else. So she was doing a double act called Lip Service up in Manchester, but I thought, I just have to work with you. So there's an example of Maggie and myself. We had a regular gig at Pentameters, which is a theatre room above a pub in Hampstead, and so therefore that's why I was remembering we did a sketch, not hilarious, but a thing together about when Prince Charles got married and he got his name mixed up, and not hilarious, but he said his name's in the wrong order. So there's an example of going, okay, well let's do that, because that the nation, the world has watched that. So we set out to do that. But for myself, doing my own comedy content, it's a case of, like most people, going inside your head, what is instinctively, what comes to the forefront, how can you make a story funny, what are funny subjects. Like, I remember in those days there was lots of tanning booths, so I had an experience in a tanning booth, so I thought, I'll just write about that experience. So it's a combination of your own experience and topicality that one hopes will elicit recognition, because, as I'm sure you both talented writers yourself, it's recognition that makes something work, largely.
But with comedy in particular, is there do you think there's a pressure to be topical as well, more so than in other types of writing?
I think you've got to show that you well, there are different types. Like, if you remember, Pam Ayres, wonderful woman, I'm sure, lovely poems, ditties, I think they're called. I'm sure she's somebody like that would be working to a fan base in a certain way, so the material would be shaped, so as to be relevant to that audience. So you're saying, do you write topicality? So I went off on a red herring there slightly. I was just thinking, what would it be like if Pam Ayres did stuff on kind of vibrators? But then she probably does. And even vibrators as a subject is probably a bit yesterday. So it is a case of, if you are going to do a subject that's a bit yesterday, be aware of it. You just have to be knowing so that you are relevant, whether that's undercutting it with your knowingness or being a step ahead. Being a step ahead is a bit risky, because people have to connect.
And with comedy as well, especially stand-up, there's always that, or certainly you hear about, people trying stuff out and some of it doesn't land, some of it does, and then you work on the stuff that does and kind of build that up. I mean, is that just a part of the process? Because how do you judge, is this going to work? Is this going to be funny? Do you just have to test it out in front of people?
I know. I don't we all think those very thoughts you've just put there? I think you've got to be. It is useful to be brave, because without trying stuff out, you're not going to know. often shortening routines, that's honing it, will get you the better result, but you have to put it out there to start with. And it's extraordinary, isn't it, how some small changes will elicit a laugh. Removing like one sentence before the build-up. Even when you're writing, you must get this. I've just written a travel piece. It took me forever because I'm not very good at writing travel pieces, because you have to have content, but it's a page job. That's why I'm doing it. In lockdown, especially, you have to have content and you have to have impression. So the combination of factual content and impressionistic is quite difficult, because I was stressed about getting my facts right, because you go down a route of getting of winching a fact in, and then you've lost your flow. And certainly, how funny, I was doing a piece on baths, being in Bath, talking about Roman coins, and I thought, this isn't funny, but it's a fact. And so it's quite interesting, isn't it, how I suppose you just have to be aware. And also, if you think about the live situation, I remember way back early television when there were like chat shows and like big audiences, and I was for some reason on with a lot of the old school comics, really nice, but grown up men who played golf and things like that, and they would do gags naturally. Not even like current contemporary men who do gags, but that is their life force. That's their currency, and that wasn't mine. So I obviously looked pleasant, because that was what I did, just try and look pleasant or neutral. But the currency, it's interesting, isn't it? Some people think that is normal to do gags all the time.
And when you've written something down and redrafting as a stand-up compared to perhaps someone who's and we will get onto the fact you've written a whole bunch of books and novels, etc. But when you're redrafting in stand-up mode, is it a case of, cause I find it's quite helpful to speak to read out what I've written out loud for the cadence, etc. Is that even more important when you're doing stand-up?
Oh yeah, so I would agree with you completely there. And when I obviously so old, so I've had gaps to try to do other things, or other things didn't come in. Let's put it that way, life. But I went back to Edinburgh the year before last with a stand-up show, and that's a really good example of going, what do I want to say? What am I doing? At least with a one person show, people will have the choice to come or not. You're not like the slot in a stand-up thing where people have to either wait till you finish or throw something or talk over you or whatever. So one has to assume that people have chosen to come and listen to you, in that they are there in an audience. And then you go, what am I going to say? And so I would just go through stuff. It was called I Might As Well Say It, because it's a kind of innocuous title, but on the other hand, it was supposed to go, do you know what, sod it, I'm just going to say it. And if it offends, because my fear is offending people all the time, so weakness and why. And then in terms of your question, going back over the actual content, you just have to hone it so that on the page you're traveling to gags quite quickly. And if you go off subject, which I did only because I forgot what I was saying, you have to be pretty sure that your audience will allow you to go off subject. But I just couldn't remember what I couldn't remember what I was doing. So and it was genuine. So because it was genuine, it hopefully worked. But I also had the script backstage that sometimes I'd have to go and pick it up and remind myself of it. But I just thought, well, this is what I'm doing, and I'm open about it, and hopefully I haven't pissed everyone off.
And how does the writing for that differ? Because did you always want to write novels as well? Was that something that you always harbored an ambition?
Well, it's quite interesting, because when you look up, there are certain types of people, when you talk to them, I'm sure you've discovered that in your pod, that they've always had a notebook, they've always written. I think that's quite interesting, talking to writers. And as a child, I wrote a sketch show, age 10. Then they asked me to write a play, and the sketch show was brilliant, and the play was really bad. So that was age 10. So as we say, like I peaked age 10. Then and I kind of thought, oh, this is really not working. And I know that sounds like I'm making up, but that is true. Now, what was the question? Because this is really interesting about oh yes. So people with notebooks. So I would write poetry. So embarrassingly enough, I still have, because I'm writing a memoir at the moment, and amazingly and embarrassingly, I have original copies of my angst-written poems, aged 14, 15. And one of the first line of one of them was, "This is a nightmare party." That was the first line of one of my teenage poems. But it's interesting because it was an outlet. So I was always writing.
Yeah.
And oddly, because I think I'm quite an inappropriate person, I've come to understand that in recent years, I would actually read my poetry out to my parents, which a lot of people wouldn't do. I mean, it's like, why would you do that? I just thought, no, I've written that, I'll just read it out to them. Oh my God. So it's, but I think a lot of writers have a notebook or have a piece of paper, and it is just a natural place to write, isn't it? Just to get it out in words, get it out of your body onto a page.
Absolutely. But did that, like, how do you know when you're doing that, this is going to work as a piece for radio or a piece for TV, or this is a book? You know, what makes you make that decision?
Well, I don't know, but an interesting example with those terms, radio, TV, whatever, the novel I wrote, Losing It, started out as a radio, a play,
right.
a one-off afternoon radio play.
Mm-hmm.
And I just found that as an exercise really helpful, because I had the idea. It was a very simple idea. And then I wrote it, I know it sounds so corny, but with a beginning, middle and end. And it was a treatment because I was pitching it. Obviously, it didn't get taken up as a radio play, because you have to remember that most things are rejected. That's normal. But it was the base for my novel.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps to, I think that radio afternoon play slot is actually quite helpful to have in your mind when you're putting a pitch together, because it's got to, like a short story, it's got to be so tight to make someone get to the end, and it's all got to be there. I think the difficulty for me, and I haven't had much success, is like a TV script. And then the holy grail, or it was 10 years ago, was to write the perfect sitcom, you know, with the studio audience in the days that happened. And that's very difficult, I think, because tastes change. And of course, the commissioning editors change, and, you know, the whole politics change. But I think writing a sitcom is very difficult, actually, whereas writing a afternoon play for radio should be easier.
And how did you find the process of writing the book? I mean, was it something that which was quite fun to do, or was it quite a slog? You know, what
no, I honestly look back at that time and I was so happy, and I didn't get it published in the normal way. I already had written, I tried it as a radio, so the pitch was all there. Had I written a bit more? Probably had. Trying to work out if I'm lying now. Try not to lie. But I do remember going to a book launch I didn't particularly want to go to, but knew I had to. In those days, you know, before lockdown, you go out and you know, a lot of the world takes place in connecting with people, some good, some bad, but you have to be in the world, you know.
Yeah.
And then I got talking to somebody from Pan Macmillan, and they seemed to like me at that point, and I got it done that way. I got a commission that way. And then I got a literary agent after that.
Right.
But that's not normal.
No,
But I don't know what is normal. So I always just say that, because I think that gives people information, you know, you can do it any which way.
Well, I mean, actually, as you know, we've recorded over 50 of these now, and what we've found with authors is that there is no normal way. You know, everyone's got into it in their own way, and it's sort of just, you know, persisting with the writing and believing in it and showing it to people, I think, is important.
Yes.
When you're writing a novel, maybe as compared to a stand-up show, but it could be the same thing. But do you know, are you someone that likes to plan it out in detail, or do you just have the idea and just sort of go for it and see where it takes you? What's your approach?
I think what's helpful is when you do your pitch, you do your treatment. So, the character is in this state when we arrive, this is what happens. And then certainly we've all gone on those courses, you do Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, which is helpful because then you can split it up, and then to an extent you kind of want to build to a crisis. What do they call it? The inciting incident.
Yes,
I mean,
right.
some of these things can actually just depress you so much. You just go, no, I'm not. But to have these pegs is helpful. And obviously to get to the end is helpful. But in between, you just got to write. And I think it's really nice to decide, wake up in the morning and decide that you're going to write that scene, or you're going to write that conversation when the person goes around the park with the trainer, and you're going to get in that person's head. But then you also have to go, well, what happens when they leave the park, and where is that taking to? What happens then to get you to the end of that chapter that will make people want to start the next? So you've also got to be aware that you split it up, you go 10 chapters, and you kind of want the end, I'm telling you what you know, but you kind of want the end of each chapter to be compelling and unfinished. So it's like being in a party with someone. You don't want the person to walk away while you're talking.
That's right.
As happens with me a lot, because I never know when to stop. And I find that quite funny, really. So you just have to pretend that, don't they say you're talking to someone, you want to keep their attention.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's actually a very good point. Because I think you want to keep all the chapters ending on a cliffhanger, keep folk wanting to turn that page. And when you're writing it, was it a long process? Did you go through a lot of drafts? Did it take a while for it to find its feet, or did it kind of come out fully formed?
Well, I'd be interested to know what other people do, because I know that some people can write fast. I did it. It took me a year, and then you go, God, really, a year? But then on this travel blooming thing, you can spend a day on a sentence and try and explain that to someone. They just laugh. They're doing an important job, like something like life-saving.
Yeah.
And then you go, no, I spent my whole day on a sentence. It just doesn't ring, does it? And then what I used to do when it went bad is the main thing is not to give up, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd lie in my bed and watch Three in a Bed, that program. You probably don't know it, but I'd watch it, then I'd allow myself to watch it for a short period of time. It always marked inertia, like things were going bad, but you take yourself away, and then you go back and you go, come on, get to the end. You just have to force yourself, don't you?
Yeah, it's as much a habit as anything else. You have to just kind of get into doing it. And with things like books, I'm not sure how it works in radio, but certainly with books, normally what you'll get is you'll send in the draft when you're happy with it to the editor, and then the editor might come back with some edits or suggestions. Are you someone that is happy to hear what other people have to say? And just relating it to comedy as well, are the audience almost like that when you're testing out stuff? Is that like getting the edits back?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's two different things, isn't it? Remember, for the book, then I wrote it, but I quite see writing as a performance. So I like someone commenting on it. I'm happy not to be on my own. And then once I knew the scenes, then they hired an editor to edit it. And then you'd get the person going, how come the person is there when they've just come from that and they don't have a raincoat? Where's the look? And you go, yes, it's not raining. No, then, so somebody will kind of do all that, the logistics. Also, I can't spell. But the thing about working out if things land, I mean, with stand-up, I talk about it. I mean, remember, I don't do it regularly, and especially in lockdown, we're all stuck in our heads. Yeah. So it's a really odd time on top of that. But I can get it wrong. I can time things wrong. I can be somehow my mood isn't right for that audience. I have to kind of fight my own personality anyway to start. So you have to go through all sorts of rituals to get yourself to give, to start from that place, to give yourself the best shot. And then sometimes I remember the first night, I think in Edinburgh, there were probably 3 people in the front row. They were pissed. Well, that's fine. 3 women. And they didn't sort of connect. And then I think I used the word Ibiza, and they got overly excited. So they weren't representative of the rest of the people.
Yeah.
But it's like, so how do you judge what landed and what didn't land in that scenario? It's the audience is made up of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But then you know, by the law of averages, you kind of hone it enough, I suppose, to get a general feel.
I mean, we were speaking to an author just recently, actually, who was saying in terms of, you know, how their books land with the audience. It's almost like it's not the author can't really. That's not part of what they do, really. It's everyone will have their own experience with a story when they read it. They'll find it funny. They'll find it sad. And you know, all the author can do is kind of put it out there, have done their best. You know, be happy with it, and then how other people connect with it is really out of their control in a lot of ways.
But I suppose I don't want to preempt your question. I'm interested to know where you're going with that. But I would just say that if you're an author, then you, as you rightly say, you've done your bit. Hopefully, you've been as authentic. Perhaps I mean, I would say authenticity is essential for that writer, and then there'll be people who won't like it.
Yeah.
Always.
Well, I mean, that's really where I was going was that with comedy, you're always going to have people that won't find something funny, but you just presumably you just have to say that's fine. It's not for you.
Well,
or do you know, like how much do you compromise it to try and appeal to as big an audience as possible?
Well, to compromise on an audience where you're completely failing, it's probably best just to leave, but you can't because they paid the money. You can die, you can try and die in a better way, you can salvage, you can be knowing. Comedy, I suppose, is more about being liked or accepted in some way, even if they hate you, they're enjoying hating you. You know, it's that connection thing. With laughter on the page, certainly comedy, I think, is written in a rhythm without sounding too twatty, but it's for the reader to decide whether they believe in that narrative voice or that dialogue, and if they do, they will absolutely love it. But it'll all be to do with the process in their own imagination, reading those words. So it's a very different exercise to the kind of more visceral thing. Like there's a human being on stage, you have 3 or 4 minutes, the audience is going to say, oh, is that person fat, thin, horrible, ugly, why are they wearing those show off clothes, or oh, I like what they're wearing, but I don't like, you know, all these judgments before the person even breathes or speaks. So judgments get in the way of so much, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you have a preference in terms of all these different types of things that you write, or do you enjoy doing a bit of everything? I
think it's just the life I've led has just gone the way it has. So I don't know, because maybe I just am a bit of a this and a that, and I get bored, and I quite like new challenges. I like meeting new people. I'm that sad person who wants to have a new friend and get drunk with them because I know they won't have heard my stories and hopefully they'll laugh. And I just like to be I'm very shallow. I just don't need like the same old friends. I need new ones all the time. But also because either it was partly my fault and my failings and my nerves that didn't get me to do more. I mean, I stopped doing stand-up when I could. I did it for 5 years, and then, you know, when you get jobs where you don't have to do stand-up, it's actually quite nice, I found. But I am so admiring of the people who just, it pulses through their veins, you know, now, oh my God, Ricky Gervais, someone like that, you know, I adore it. I just think, wow, you know, it's an art form, and they must love it. And I did love going back in Edinburgh. I did love it. I did love being myself, and it just took me a very long time to learn that it was actually all right to be myself, and that, I know it sounds so corny, but not everyone will like what you do, but if there are enough, that's enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You just have to just try and believe that that's enough.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
hard, isn't it? It's hard. It's blooming hard.
Yeah.
Why are we so flaky? We just want people to like our stuff. Yes, but that's a creative person, isn't it?
Well, that's it. You're putting yourself out there in some way, in a way that you don't, as if you're a lawyer or something.
You don't.
So,
you do your bit and you get paid for your bit, and
exactly.
and you can be good at your bit.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, we've avoided that. Well, I would be a very bad lawyer, mind you. But we're doing what we're doing, and it doesn't always go in straight lines. And I've gone with opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, do you find this in lockdown? Obviously, it gives you time to look back. So I think, okay, I did make a few mistakes, particularly with agents. But then on the other hand, you don't know any better when you just do what you do. And times have changed so much. If I was young now, it would be great because I'd be gigging and not having to worry so much, I think.
Well, I wanted to ask you about the Comedy Women in Print Writing Prize, which you've launched, which is for
other women.
Other women. and am I right in saying that you launched it and you kind of created it because you had a dissatisfaction in the lack of representation in award winners of other types of awards? Is that kind of right?
Yeah. Although for me, I've written one comedy novel. That's it. So, but it did go okay, and it did get nominated for the BP, not BP, actual people. They're not interested. They don't give money to anything. So the PG Wodehouse Comedy Literary Prize. So I was thrilled with that nomination because just to be nominated, I'd never been nominated for anything. So, but that gave me the idea. Plus, having been a judge, because everyone gets asked to be a judge. I'm sure you guys, everyone, there's loads of things out there, more and more. There's a prize every street. There's a literary festival every street. Great. So I just had the idea that I could, having been on that side, and the fact that there wasn't a women's comedy literary prize, I just did it. I jumped in. I think it's important not to sound that word grumpy, rather than just look at the platform it is creating. Like people have become published because of Quit.
Yeah. And
in fact, even today, somebody got longlisted in the first year has got published, and that's great. You just have to go. You just have to just do what you can, but it is very stressful managing people. So this is not my go-to place. I worry. I spent all of lockdown worrying about pissing people off and trying to get people to do stuff and just being very humble, which is not my natural. I'm not naturally humble, and it's horrible to be humble all the fucking time and begging people to do stuff. On the other hand, that's, how else do you make a thing happen from nothing?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Is it important to you to having as a woman who's gone through the process yourself from scratch without that help that you now are giving other people? It's important for you to try and share your experiences and to try and help people over the hurdles that you maybe had to go through yourself?
Yeah, I mean, there are worse things to do, that's what I think. And, I never did anything in the right order. I didn't get the right grades. I did the kind of weird degree. I started stand-up late. I would always say to any person, it doesn't matter when you do something. I mean, you could start writing at 70. You know what I mean? It's like all these rules. I suppose I've always, just because I haven't kind of done things normally, I think that's helpful to others, and people. It's a nice community to try and be positive about wit, because I love enjoying other people's funny stuff. I mean, it just makes me so happy, and especially in lockdown, just to kind of connect with people. But wit is the connector. A great connect. It's not the only connector. Sadness is as well. But it's nice to encourage more of it. But to be funny, you have to be a bit sort of acerbic and honest as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's quite difficult in today's culture, perhaps, where if people aren't disposed to embrace your version of something, then you can be told and cut out. Mm-hmm. So these are the times we live in. We just have to manage it.
Yeah, but do you think that opportunities? You were saying earlier that when you started, it was the sort of old school male comedians. Do you think opportunity and with authors as well? We've spoken to that. Female authors who were writing crime were told to use their initials on the book rather than their names, because there's this thing that people think men won't buy books by women, and I don't know if that's backed up by numbers, but do you think that sort of thing is improving just now, or is it still quite bad?
I think everything's evolved so much, really, and things are talked about. I think I suppose the next phase would be to encourage even braver conversations so that we can learn as we talk. Mm-hmm. That's another thing, so that people are so keen to get it right, who's to decide what's right. I think one could dare. It would be nice to be more daring in the way we talk now, but on the other hand, it's quite good that we have got to where we are, because there was so much imbalance and sexism and so much that obviously. So I think evolution is quite sensible, but we've got to nudge it. We've got to do more.
Yeah, keep nudging it. Yeah.
But I'm not, someone who did politics on stage and. Ben Elton, The Gift of Maggie Thatcher, that the 80s. I don't know if you can remember that comedy, but it was fantastic. God, we needed that stuff out there. We lapped it up. We needed it because we were going through such difficult time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it is a way for comedy to make people view what's going on around them in a different light. You put a spin on it, you make someone laugh at something and think, so actually, why am I laughing at that? Why, it does force you to think about stuff in a way that. Or certainly in a way that's maybe more accessible to a lot of people than a political essay or something.
I know, and I just know that there's this thing called How the Light Gets In, which is an amazing festival, and it's down the road from Hay on Wye. It's a bit of a secret festival, and then you go and you can wrangle stuff and thoughts and ideas and in a tent, and then you can go and get pissed afterwards, which is great, or even before. And I just think there's a place for talking about it. It's a bit wanky, maybe some people might say, but I think talking is really exciting, and it does break some boundaries to talk. I think we've got to make talking more exciting now, less fearful. Always want to think about the next thing, and if you don't find something funny, that's okay, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you don't like a book, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why would we all like? I mean, I had on the travel piece, somebody the hotel put a sonnet on my bed, a Shakespeare sonnet, and I thought, I don't understand a word of this. I just don't understand Shakespeare sonnet right now. My head is somewhere else. So that's okay as well, isn't it? It's like, I just think connecting and making people laugh is the ideal.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, we've spoken as well to other people in sort of related to that, not comedy, but there can be a certain snobbery to you've got to like certain books. You've got, a literary book is good and a sci-fi book is bad, or things like that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this, and it's just nonsense, because they can both be valuable to someone. They can both change someone's life. They can,
Depends where you are. I think anything that lifts you. I mean, the power of books to take you to another place. That's what you want. I mean, with the question about male, female, I was going to say genitalia. I didn't mean that. I meant alphabetical, letter, alphabetical things. I don't know. When people say what was the funniest book, right? So when I was, going around the literary festivals promoting Losing It, so I had to have, what was your funniest book? So at that point, a few years ago, I read Starter for 10. I don't know. I know it was made into a film by David Nichols. Look at what's happened to David Nichols. But I just found a page on that book just made me laugh out loud, and I didn't know whether it was a man or whoever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just go. Do you know what? That is just so funny. I love these 2 pages. I love that narrative voice, and I'm so happy that I'm laughing. That's what you want, isn't it?
I think finding a book, especially, I find if you can find a book that makes you actually laugh out loud, it's not that easy to do. You know, there's a lot of books can make you smile, but
what would make you experience laughter? What would be a thing where you're reading a thing and you go, oh my God, I can perceive I'm now laughing? What well,
the last I can't remember exactly what it was, but the last book that it was I don't know if Stuart Heritage, who writes he's a columnist for The Guardian, but he wrote a book called Don't Be a Dick, Pete, which is basically a sort of book about his brother. But it was there were moments in that where I was reading it in bed on my Kindle. My wife was asleep and I was trying not to wake her up with laughter.
Isn't that joyous though?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Maybe you've got a brother like that. But isn't that brilliant? Because then you knew where he was coming from, whatever,
yeah.
But that feeling, that is so nice. It stops us being alone, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know that sounds so corny because I have thought about that. But that's reading funny stuff that makes you laugh.
Yeah.
Is a great cure for loneliness.
Yeah, it is, definitely. And just to touch on it briefly, obviously you've obviously acted in a lot of things as well. I mean, do you like, how does that compare to your own creative stuff? Is it fun playing in other people's worlds,
yes,
if you like?
I do like it. And I did something very recently. There was an email that came, would I like to be in a short film with Maureen Lipman? And I thought, great. And then I thought, I don't want to learn it. This is lockdown. We managed to do it. And I thought, please let it not be good. So hardly any lines. Bromley, which is nearby. Maureen Lipman, what's not to like?
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought, yeah, I'll do that. It was a short film. And so you don't have to have the responsibility or anything. Not that sounds arrogant. Anyway, I just thought that suits me. Mm-hmm. Messing about in a kitchen with Maureen Lipman doing all the funny business, like with saucepans and stuff, and me just being there to serve her and to be helpful, and then hopefully so she'd like me at the end. And but obviously you do a bit, but I did a bit. But I just thought, this is joyous. I love it. It's exciting. There's a lot of, you forget the faff of hanging around a lot and people tweaking collars and stuff, and maybe don't need tweaking. But that's the game, isn't it? So I think the main thing is, when stuff comes in and you're able to do it, I jump, and I'm just grateful. Because nobody, apart from maybe Judi Dench, I don't know if she's done stand-up, nobody can be employed all the time doing everything. It's not possible.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
And what is it that you're working on right now then? What's
the
next?
Memoir. So Comedy Women in Print has taken up the last 9 months of my life, I have to say. I can get quite boring, but I did say trying. But it is a passion, and it is going forward next year. So there's a little bit of a break now. I'm doing the Chortle Festival. I'm doing the Cambridge Literary Festival for Quip. So there are Zoom things like this, so you keep it. So obviously there's an excitement about year 3 and how that's going to be different and better and all that. For me, I want to do some comedy online. Who doesn't? A podcast. Who doesn't? A memoir that people will read. You can tell me what will people want to read. I don't know. I just, to write a memoir and get it right is a challenge.
Yeah.
But I've got to do it all before it's too late.
And is that do we know when that memoir will be out, or is it early days on that?
It's got to be next year. So right. It just depends. It depends how I publish it.
Okay.
So you can get me back on. It's got to be out next year. What's the point? We have to do it. Everything has to be done fast. I've got most of it done, and it's just, is it an indulgence? I mean, do you read memoirs? I don't know. Is it, you've got to be interested in what the person experienced.
I think it can be really interesting. It just depends. Yeah. Depends on
Could
the
be really
person,
dull.
and yeah, it can be.
Car boot.
It
It's like, oh, a
it could
face,
be. It entirely.
face that used to be on television in the 80s, car boot. Could be that.
No, but for
I'm just trying to think of something sensational that may have happened once. In fact, somebody just said to me, an agent I'm not with, they said, oh, just talk about when you're at drama school and somebody pushed you down the stairs. They don't have to have done, but just put it in. I'm not going to do that. It's got to be true.
Are you doing like an audio version of it? Because I'm a big fan of audio versions of folk reading their own memoirs out, because I find that it kind of.
Oh right, yes, yeah. With the writer reading it, with
exactly.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I read Losing It. I read that. I was thinking, how could you possibly get anyone else to read that? And I love reading audiobooks. I'm just trying to work out. I've got to get a very young person to come and explain after lockdown how to do a recording thing in my own house so that I can read audiobooks from home in lockdown. I love audiobooks, but yeah, that would be. I've just got to. It's going to happen. I'm going to do it.
What is the last book that you read?
Okay. Dipped into. This is the Rupert Everett one.
Oh yeah.
Red Carpets and Other Banana Skins, because. That is very readable, and I think he's quite cruel about other people and cruel about himself, which appeals to me. So I'll say the Rupert Everett one. But I haven't read the whole of it, so I'll be honest with you. In fact, lockdown reading. I mean, come on, I can't even write a travel piece right now. It's really difficult. I manage Newsnight, and I just watch that.
Yeah, no, I know. I found audiobooks have been good during this time. I think
I'm going to take a leaf out book and just sort it, but I'd have to get an app and learn how to press the button, but then I would do that. Audiobooks is the future. Yes.
What about the last film that you watched?
Oh my God. Okay. Whoa. Oh, right. Well, obviously there's opportunity on Netflix. Oh, there was a really... Are we allowed to say the things on Netflix?
Yeah,
of course, yeah.
So there was a film on the other day, called Beatrice. It was a satire, an American satire. Beatrice Comes to Dinner or something like that. We'll have to Google it. But it was hilarious because it was so dark and awkward, and it was sort of privileged American people in America. With an awkward person who stays to dinner. It's my cup of tea, and it's played so real that that person who just speaks for that much too long and then just embraces people too quickly. I love it. I adore inappropriateness. It's a delight. So it's got the word Beatrix in it, and it's a film, and it's on Netflix.
We'll find out, and we'll put it in the podcast. Awesome. Yeah. And then the last TV show that you watched or series that you're watching.
Oh, well, I'm currently watching the thriller because I find that thrillers are the only things called The Undoing. I'm in the middle of it with Hugh Grant and Nicole Kidman.
I've not started watching it yet.
Visually very different from the last time I saw it, but it's decent. The first one is very decent. It's like you genuinely don't know where it's going, and it's shot nicely, and you just that's the only thing to do right now is to watch classy thrillers.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. And the very final thing we do is a super quick fire, either or. There's no right answer apart from one of them.
You've done this 50 times, I can tell. Go on.
And the first one is Absolutely Fabulous or Bottom.
Oh, God. I can't answer that because Fab people recognise Bottom. I was with Rik Mayall, so... I'd have to go Bottom, sorry.
Okay. TV or cinema?
TV.
Fancy restaurant or a takeaway?
Takeaway.
Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Night owl.
And the last one, real book or ebook?
don't know how to do an ebook, so I'm not advanced. Real book is, I can feel it. I need to feel things.
Well, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that one.
It was good fun, and I think you watched The Undoing as well recently, Tarek, didn't you?
Unfortunately, I did spend 6 hours of my life watching the Undoing. I became undone by the end of it. It was, I don't know if Helen's finished it now or not, but one of the biggest letdowns I've actually seen for a while, to be honest. Like the cast and writer involved in that show, really did fall apart at the end for me.
Harsh criticisms.
Yeah.
I've not yet seen it, but it sounds like I won't be bothering to see it.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I probably wouldn't bother. Sorry if you Grant's listening to this one. You were fine. I didn't have a problem with you, Grant, but.
And the film she mentioned there was Beatrice at Dinner. I think that's the title of it on Netflix, which did sound like a good one, worth watching. But I really enjoyed that chat, as you said, and you know that thing that we talked about. Laughing, a book that can make you laugh out loud, I think, is a very special thing.
Very hard to do.
Yeah, it is, because I don't know what it is. Maybe just because you internalize everything when you're reading a book. So even things that amuse you, you might smirk or, but to actually laugh out loud at something off the page is a great gift if you can get that done. So
I think you have to be in the right mood for it as well. Because often, I suppose it's different if you're watching a film. You're like, I'm in a mood for a comedy film right now, and you watch a comedy film. But if you're in a book, for me anyway, if I'm reading a book, I'll read the book. I don't go to bed at night and think, I want to laugh. I'm going to read this comedy book.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of perfect storm of in the right mood, written in that way that does get to you personally. Yeah, it's
and sometimes it can be in books that you don't expect it as well. Just one line, a throwaway line, can make you laugh out loud. It is a great gift to try and master. And the Comedy Women Print Prize as well, I think, it's a big thing she's taken on there by setting up an award like that, but totally worthwhile, because as we've spoken about before, there is still an equality issue that needs to be fixed there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. And it's a really important issue that you'd like to think would kind of be gone in this day and age, but clearly it isn't.
Yeah, but hopefully prizes like that will help.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks very much to Helen for coming on the podcast. And we've got another great guest next week, Ali Reynolds, whose debut novel, Shiver, is coming out, I think, on the 21st of January. I think it might be a bit earlier in the US, but it's in the next week or so.
It was a really fun chat we had with Ali. She's, for those that don't know, obviously this is her first book, but you may know her from her previous career as a professional snowboarder.
Yes, quite the career change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but we chat to her about that, and also obviously about what it's like being a debut author, and Shiver's got quite a lot of buzz around it as well, so it's definitely worth checking that one out as well. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UK Page 1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.